Episode 307, Serena's Remarriage? Henry turned his head and twisted his full-fledged eyebrows, asking, "Why?" Drake was speechless for a moment, but soon looked at him with a look of indignation and loudly said, "You're ruining my family. Do you know that? That is my brother's wife. That guy had been dead for so long. Do you want to keep Serena a widow?" Henry was unhappy and gave him a stare. He quickly turned back to look at the computer screen. In the past few years, it was one of the few photos of them. Drake did not feel comfortable. Madly, he pushed the back of Henry's head and said, "If she likes you, she would have accepted you a long time ago. She is very fond of Jake and is loyal to him. Don't you think you're too cheap to go after her?" "Fuck off!" Henry took his hand off. "I'm happy to be cheap." Drake looked at his joyful look and ridiculed. "Do you feel justified being a homewrecker?" "What homewrecker? Jake died, didn't he?" Henry shut down the computer, put it away, and looked back at Drake with slight displeasure and anger. "If he was still alive, I would never try something like this. When he was around, did you see me approaching her?" Drake had no words, feeling suffocated. Henry stood up and unbuttoned his suit jacket, his tone full of profound meanings. "Anyone has the right to pursue happiness a second time. Serena is a good girl. Drake, you cannot let her stay with a dead man. That's not fair." It was not fair to her, or to him. Drake still felt terrible. His eyes fell on the computer screen, and he said, "She's accepted you?" "She will, sooner or later." Henry took off his suit and revealed a thin, light blue shirt inside. Henry's figure was very good. At this moment, the thin shirt was like a second skin on his body, outlining the muscles underneath. Drake glanced at him and couldn't move his eyes. Seeing Henry's confused look, Drake rolled his eyes and turned back to his room. Closing the door, he found that his heartbeat was extremely fast and his cheeks were slightly hot. "Mama!" Drake was going crazy. "What's happening? Shit! No, I have to go to a networking party in a few days. Scared to death now." However, he couldn't let Serena marry this guy. How could Jake rest in peace with this knowledge? She could marry anyone. Why did it have to be Henry? Drake felt regretful and he picked up the phone, sending Serena a message. "Sister-in-law, you really decided?" Z. "No, why does it have to be him? Jake will climb out and kick his ass." Z. "He hated him so much, and you know that." Z. "Hey." Henry watched him return to his room in a weird way, felt amused, and quickly entered the bathroom while unbuttoning his shirt. When he came out, he received several new messages. Serena. "Henry, shall we have lunch together at noon tomorrow?" Henry curled his lips and replied, "Okay." He saw another message from a person he had not seen for a long time. Mary Parker. "Congratulations, you finally got what you want." Henry. "Thank you." Mary saw this reply. She had thought that she would feel heartache and cry, but unexpectedly, her heart was calm. No waves, no ups and downs. The only thing left was a sigh. 12 years. Henry had waited for Serena for 12 years. How many 12 years could one have? Lying in bed, Mary was holding a mobile phone and looking at her desktop. This was a selfie. The girl in the photo had an arrogant look on her face, holding her phone. Just behind the girl, a man in a burgundy suit with a slightly sinister smile was hugging her. His pair of beautiful eyes were fixed on the girl's face. "Long time no see, Jackson." Jake was blindfolded and thrown in the backseat of the car. There was a pungent perfume around him. It was Lila. With his hands tied behind him and his eyes blindfolded, Jake's hearing was exceptionally sharp. In addition to the noises, there was the sound of the crickets at night. The car had been going for a long time, and he was calculating the time secretly. About 70 or 80 minutes later, the car stopped. The speed was quite steady at about 40 to 50 kilometers an hour, which meant that he was not far from the villa he just came out of. From his last investigation, he discovered that Cox Enterprise was just a sham, and the real headquarters in Austin was somewhere else. On the way, they stopped for probably 5 traffic lights, went on 2 ramps and 1 highway, and most of the time, there were noises around. In other words, this place was in a busy area, but now it was very quiet around. Very likely it was a relatively high-end residential area or office building in the city center or around. Jake was pondering this when he was abruptly taken out by 2 bodyguards. After entering, he heard the sound of a card being swiped, but the surroundings were still very quiet. They went up in an elevator, 2 bodyguards with a blindfolded man. There was no questioning. People in this place must have been used to this situation. He estimated that this whole building was owned by the White's company, but it was impossible for them to use the name of White. There must be another name that was used in public. Just where was this place? Ding! After about a minute or so, the elevator arrived. Jake had a thought. According to the frequency and time of the elevator's rise, there should be 48 to 50 floors. There was not many buildings with such height in Austin. Lila did not speak out from beginning to end. When they got to the top, she picked up the phone and said, "Hey, we are on the top floor. Shall we go straight into the VIP room?" Top floor. Jake searched for similar buildings to this one in his mind, but before he could figure out where it was, he was pushed hard into a room. Jake felt that the surrounding had become dark and silent. They locked him up again. It took about 10 minutes before the door was opened. The sound of sharp high heels stepping on the ground came in. At the same time, there was also the sound of Facebook being refreshed. "Hey, Jay, I have good news for you." Lila's voice was deliberately sharp, with ridicule in her laughter. "About your wife. Would you like to hear?" Jake listened carefully and felt something must be wrong. Pursing his lips, Jake did not say anything. Lila sneered aloud. "Boring. What the heck are you pretending? I'm telling you, your wife is getting married." His wife was getting married? What did she mean? Jake turned toward Lila's direction, but his eyes were blindfolded and nothing could be seen. Lila clearly perceived that he suddenly cooled down. The lines of his jaw were more tense, making him look unspeakably charming. Lila saw this, looked down, and her laughter became sharper. She said, "Oh, what a heavenly match. This Henry is quite handsome." She displayed the picture on her phone, walked behind Jake, and took off his blindfold. "Would you like to see it? He is as good looking as you, right?" The mobile phone was handed over to Jake. In that photo, Serena was smiling, and at her side, Henry's profile was right there. The scene was really romantic. His hands, which were tied behind him, were clenched into fists. Looking at the photo, his breathing couldn't help accelerating. Lila looked at his reaction. Although it was extremely slight, she knew him very well. Jake's reaction was enough to explain that he cared about this matter. "So ruthless. You've just been dead for 4 years, and before your body gets cold, this woman is already thinking about remarriage. I thought she loves you a lot." Lila took her shoes off and sat down next to Jake on the bed. She slowly unzipped her skirt. "She used to pretend so well. When you were beaten half dead by my people, she cried really hard." Lila's face was filled with sympathy. As she was talking, she became naked. Jake unconsciously looked at the mirror not too far from him, which reflected the body of Lila. But it was just a glance, and he immediately removed his gaze. Lila sneered. "With such acting skills, it's a pity that you don't work in entertainment." "Do you think so?" After peeling off the last piece, Lila slowly leaned over and gently rubbed his back. Jake's face became grim. He closed his eyes and growled, "Get lost!" This reaction was completely in the expectation of Lila, and she did not mind it. Sitting up, she slowly walked back to the wardrobe next to the bed, opened the door, chuckled, and said, "She has abandoned you, but you're still staying celibate for her? Is it worth it?" Jake's lip line was tight. He made no sound. Lila found a nightgown set, opened a bottle of red wine, and slowly poured it into the decanter on the serving cart. Taking 2 glasses, Lila filled them with the scarlet liquid, shook them, and walked to Jake. With bare feet, she made every step slow and elegant. Her sexy wavy hair was tied up, with some small hair hanging down in front of her forehead. Somewhat messy, but beautiful and enchanting. Naturally, one must first ignore her stiff, pale face. He closed his eyes and clearly noticed that she had come to his side. Lila slowly sat down in front of him, handed him a glass, and chuckled. "Drink with me?" Jake did not open his eyes or answer her. In Lila's beautiful big eyes, there was loneliness. She put the 2 glasses down, leaned forward, half kneeling. Jake clearly noticed her approach, turned slightly sideways, and avoided her. However, Lila leaned forward quickly, threw herself on top of him, and rode him under her body.